Do you believe that if, in fact, the president had adopted public option in terms of health care as the way to go, whether it was public option, single payer, whatever the definition was, but a public option, that it would have been able to have gotten through the Congress?
You know, we certainly did that. We did it in the House.
Away from a Senate where you had a filibuster.
Exactly. And so I'm really not sure that we would have been able to get a single Republican vote in the Senate. I would have liked to seen the president come out stronger. I think it would have been helpful with assuring the base that he's really, firmly with us on that, but I'm not sure that it actually would have made a difference in the final vote.
I'd just like to point out what I consider the incredibly warped logic here, because here we have this commission. I mean, we recognize that there are ways to control costs, public option being one, Representative Schakowsky talking about controlling drug costs. Right. We spend over $300 billion a year on prescription drugs. We're supposed to projected to spend over $450 billion by the end of the decade. There's enormous potential for savings. I mean, if these were sold in a competitive market, we'd be paying 1/10 that amount. So there's enormous potential for savings on what we spend on prescription drugs. So we know where there are very, very big potential savings, but because there are political obstacles to get that, we say, well, it's hard to fight the drug companies. It's hard to fight the insurance companies. So then we're going to go back to our seniors who are struggling as is and say, well, now you're going to have to pay more out of pocket, and we're going to cut your Social Security. That doesn't make sense to me. To my mind, that's kind of an outrage.
And the Commission has said that they recognize that Social Security had absolutely nothing to do with the deficit. And in fact, if it weren't for the $2.5 trillion right now in the trust fund to go up to $4 trillion, our debt numbers would look even worse than they are. But one of the things that I thought was really a consensus on the Commission is that we would do nothing to raise the costs for seniors, for people 55 years and older. And Alan Simpson scolding older Americans saying, nothing we do is going to affect you, so what are you whining about? Well, the truth of the matter is the proposal that they put on the table to do 75-year solvency for Medicare does hurt current beneficiaries, because what it does is change the calculation for the cost of living adjustment and lowers how much how much we would add to Social Security every year. Well, that, again, is really a backwards calculation, because the elderly, if you look at their real market basket, how much they spend on things, because it's so heavily tilted toward health care being fair, we would instead give a greater COLA to Social Security beneficiaries, not COLA. And actuary for Social Security shows that by raising the age of Social Security and changing the COLA calculation, we will be cutting significantly into Social Security as we move down the road.
Dean, what would you do about Social Security?
Now, in terms of Social Security overall, basically the program is fine. You know, we will have to do something. We get these people running around, well, if we don't do anything in, 27 years by the trustees, 29 years by the Congressional Budget Office projections, it faces a shortfall. Yeah, somewhere we will have to fix it. There's no urgency about that. We aren't going to let it go off a cliff. It doesn't go off a cliff, because even after those dates, it could still pay roughly 80% of benefits even if we never did anything. So my own view is that, look, we have a long-term issue. We could deal with that. I'd rather not do it today because there's so much misinformation spread by a lot of these people. 60%, I just saw a poll recently, 60% of people under age 60 think they're going to get no benefit at all. I just don't think that's a good environment in which to decide the future of the program. But what I would like to see over a longer term, if you compare the United States to other wealthy countries, we give a much lower replacement rate, much lower share of people's working wage in retirement. I'd actually like to see us go the other way, particularly for those at the bottom. And we could, and again, I'll give Senator Simpson and Mr. Bowles some credit. They do propose to increase benefits at the bottom. That's something I would very much like to see, because it costs very little money, and it can make a very big difference for moderate income people to raise those benefits, say, by 15, 20%. It will make a difference in their lives.
I think it's important to note on Social Security how modest a benefit it is. The average benefit for a retiree from Social Security is $14,000 a year. For women, it's $12,000 a year. But that represents a significant part of retirement income. About 2/3 of Americans rely on Social Security for more than half of their income, and fully a quarter, that's it. Social Security and nothing more. A 60-year-old or a 40, 50-year-old, if they want to worry about retirement, they should worry about a defined pension plan from their employer, because those are the things that are going by the wayside. Those are disappearing. Social Security has never missed a check, and if we do it right, it will never miss a check.
Here is what Peter Orszag said in the New York Times in his column. On Social Security in particular, the reaction from the left seems off to me. If you look at the specific Social Security proposals in the co-chair's set of recommendations, they include a change that makes the benefits formula more progressive. They include a change that makes the payroll tax more progressive. They include changes to make the index used to measure cost of living increases more accurate. Most importantly, the proposals don't include private accounts as part of Social Security, which 4 or 5 years ago had been the single most important thing that progressives were fighting against. The proposal now offers an opportunity to lock that in, because in 10 or 15 or 20 years, assuming there's not a reform now, those issues may well be back on the table. Private accounts as part of Social Security are definitely dead for now, so I don't fully understand why the left is not eager to lock in that victory. Dean?
Well, let me give you an example.
You're locking in cuts if you accept this proposal, and they're big cuts. And Peter's being a little disingenuous here. He's calling it a more accurate. It's a lower cost of living adjustment. I'd be happy to have an argument about the accuracy, but Representative Schakowsky was exactly right. The Bureau of Labor Statistics actually has an index measuring the cost of living for the elderly, and it shows that that increases more rapidly than the cost of living adjustment. So Peter's just being a little disingenuous with that. We're talking about serious cuts here. When he says it makes it more progressive, we do have some increase at the bottom, and that's great. But we're cutting, what they're talking about, cutting affluent benefits for affluent elderly. I get a big kick out of this, because when we talk about the tax code, you aren't affluent unless you're getting $250,000 or maybe $1 million a year. When you talk about affluent elderly, we're talking about people who got $45,000, $50,000 a year during their working lifetime. School teachers, firefighters, factory workers, auto workers. I mean, these are not people that we ordinarily think of as elderly. And we have data on this. Most of these people have accumulated very little during their working lifetime. They took a big hit with the collapse of their housing bubble, For most middle-income people, their major asset was their home, and they just saw that equity, or much of that equity, disappear. I'm not, I'll take my chances 10 or 15 years from now. We'll have a lot more people who are already getting Social Security at that point. I'll roll the dice, and we'll see about privatization at that point.
And the chief actuary for Social Security computed, has a whole chart. But if someone retires at that makes $43,000 a year in 2015, by 2050, his Social Security benefits under the proposal would be down about 15%. And so that's a significant cut.
What kind of leadership would both of you like to see on the part of President Obama on this issue?
Well, I would hope that the president, well, first of all, it's unclear what the commission is actually going to do. I think that if there are cuts to Social Security and Medicare, I would like to see the president say this is not the path that we're going to take to reduce either the deficit or the long-term debt. If he sees that we're going to do 75% from cuts to programs and only 25% from raising revenue, I would hope that he would say this is not the path that we're going to take.
Do you believe that, back to the point about 14 votes, I think they are suggesting, Bowles and Simpson, that they see a way maybe to get there. You don't see a way to get there, do you, having sat on the commission?
No, I'm not saying. It depends what we mean by what a proposal is. There may be a number of things. Dean said some of the things that are good about the proposal, what they say about Social Security, and some of the elements. So there may be some things that we can agree on. If we have to come up with a whole comprehensive plan, they really overhaul the whole tax code. I don't see that we're going to get to 14. So, we can trim our sails and I think come up with some kind of a constructive proposal that may just at least point us in the right direction.
Dean, what was the midterm elections, the results? How do you read them?
Well, there's been a lot of polling data on this. I think it's very clear. People aren't happy about the economy. They're unhappy about the jobless situation. There's little prospect the economy is going to turn around, at least in any big way, anytime soon. And that's always the main issue that people vote on. They ask, how are things in their lives? And for tens of millions of people, they're out of work. Some of their families out of work. They're worried about losing their job. No one's seeing pay increases. I think the data is overwhelming with that. Now, a lot of people did answer the deficit. I should point out, almost no one answered that as their first answer. So if you press them, they would say the deficit. But the reality is very few people, those of us sitting here in Washington, have our nose in the books. But frankly, for the vast majority of people, if the deficit were twice as high or half as high, they would still say they're worried about the deficit. It's a really big number. Almost no one has a sense of how big that is. So when things are going bad, the idea that the government's running too big a deficit, that's something that people seize on. But I think the bottom line is people want to see progress in the economy, and they have right to be upset. 9.6% unemployment is a really, really bad situation.
Do you think also there was an issue of sort of unfairness, that somehow people were looking at their own situation and saying, you know, somehow this is not, the way things are going is not fair for me?
In 2008, 40%, we won by 40% people who said that they were doing worse off now than they were 4 years ago. This time, we lost 29% of people who gave the same answer about 2 years ago, that they're doing worse than they were. That's almost a 70% swing. So it's the economy, stupid. It's their own personal economy that they're not doing well. But I also think that they do feel that the banks were bailed out, Wall Street is still giving out big bonuses, that, that there's an unfairness that's built into this too.
What ought to be the debate in the country today? Much has been said that this commission and the Simpson-Bowles proposal has started the debate. What ought to be the debate as you see it?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to talk about how to get the economy really moving. And so I think it would be a serious mistake if we overfocus at this moment on the deficit or the debt. That what we have to talk about are jobs. How are we going to get people working? And that's why I think that we need to be spending money. We need to be making those investments. That's how I hope we can shift the debate right now.
Dean, what should be the debate?
Yeah, Representative Schakowsky is exactly right. We have to get the economy going again. And the point is, and this is what President Obama should say, because it happens to be true, that if we get the economy going again, we have no short-term deficit problem to speak of. So if we got the economy going again, we got the unemployment rate down to more normal levels, 4.5%, 5%, wherever we might get it to, we would not have a big deficit problem. Over the longer term, it's healthcare. It's a healthcare story that's easy to show. Let's be honest. We all know it's very hard to fix healthcare. I understand, and I appreciate the Healthcare Reform Act. It's a very good first step. We almost certainly will have to go further. Let's be honest about it and say it's a healthcare problem. It's not a spending problem more generally. It's healthcare, and we will need more revenue. And again, Representative Schakowsky mentioned the right place to look, Wall Street. Even the International Monetary Fund is recommending taxes on Wall Street. And I was kind of amazed that you had Senator Simpson get out there and say, we harpooned every whale. Well, they missed a really big one because they had no taxes whatsoever on Wall Street, and you can get a lot of money there because that's where it is.
On that, thank you very much, Dean. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Schakowsky.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.